All right, here we are, episode number 6, Beers with Chad, coming to you live on Instagram at Chad Wesley Smith from my backyard, Costa Mesa, California. And don't anyone try and find out where I live, because that would be weird. But today I'm drinking Knee Deep Brewing Company Lupilin River Imperial Double IPA, suggested to me by, I think, someone in a DM or a comment about a Beers with Chad episode, but also by Steve, the manager at Albertsons, who now likes to talk to, since he saw me buying more craft kind of beers, and talked to me for like 5 minutes at the checkout stand about it, and made a bunch of other people wait. But that was fine. So thank you for the tip there, Steve. This is rated 4.3 out of 5 on Beer Advocate, 4.3 stars out of 5, 8% alcohol by volume. That is a Knee Deep Brewing Co. Lupilin River Imperial IPA. So, cheers to all you wonderful people watching from wherever you're watching from. That's pretty good. That's pretty damn good. So today I want to talk to you about this is, I guess, sort of a classic sports talk radio thing that they do a couple times a year, is they'll talk to you about their Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore NFL, Mount Rushmore of basketball, whatever it is. So I'm going to talk to you about the Mount Rushmore, my Mount Rushmore for powerlifting. And I was a history major in college, and not that gets put to much use these days in the day-to-day life of running Juggernaut. But there's a few things I remember from it, and I know that the artist who created Mount Rushmore selected those presidents: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt. Not necessarily because he felt that they were the best presidents, or that you couldn't consider them all the founding fathers or anything like that, because Lincoln and Roosevelt wouldn't have been in the right time frame. But he felt that they were the presidents at the most impactful, important events of American history up to that point. So as I talk today about the Mount Rushmore powerlifting, I want to keep that same thing in mind. There are only 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore. I'm going to have 5 people on my powerlifting Mount Rushmore, so sue me, sorry. But I think that these represent 5 really impactful, significant eras of powerlifting. So we'll lead things off with the old timers, and my representative for the old timer era on the Mount Rushmore powerlifting is Don Reinhart. And Don Reinhart, an incredible super heavyweight lifter, held the no wraps world record in the total for such a long time. I think it was 2391. It was it stood from 1972 up until 2014, so just incredible longevity there. Fantastic, I think, representative of the sport. And this old time era, this is from basically the start of the sport of powerlifting until the very late 70s into the early 80s. And I think that this is a time characterized by a bit of a lack of organization in powerlifting. The transition and stuff from the odd lifts competitions into more formalized powerlifting was quite a bit before Don Reinhart. But yeah, there was USA, or there was the IPF competition at this point, but it was a little bit all over the place. It was even looking back to something like the first 1,000-pound squat, that Lee Moran is so often credited with the first 1,000-pound squat, but Dave Waddington actually did it before. But Dave Waddington did it basically at a local meet, and Lee Moran did it at a more high level, national level meet. So Lee Moran is the one credited with it. So there wasn't much unification. There wasn't much organization. So Don Reinhardt is my representation, or the representative from this era. His face is going up on Mount Rushmore, Mount Liftmore, as many of the viewers have been calling it here in the comments. I think other people who could definitely be considered for that, John Cole. John Cole was my favorite lifter as I came into the sport. I really admired John Cole because he came from a track and field background, as did I. He was able to compete across multiple disciplines, and he held, for a very long time, the 308's total record, and did that at 288 body weight. So now on 24-hour weigh-ins, maybe he's competing as a 275, and that record would be even harder to beat, 2364 at 308 or at 288. A phenomenal number. He also had the 242's record for a long time. So these numbers that stood for a very long time. I think this era of powerlifting, the old timer era, is something that from talking to people who competed in that time, I got to have a long conversation with Bruce Wilhelm, who is a very interesting guy. If you've ever gotten to talk to him, he's someone who would be in contention for being up on there. And he would talk, and he told me about people wearing jean shorts under the singlet and the tennis balls behind the knees, like inside the knee wraps, and yes, they're wearing ace bandages as knee wraps, but no regulation on the length. People sewing multiple pairs together, layering multiple pairs on top of each other. So again, this old timers era is sort of a bit lawless but disorganized. I think Doug Young is also a very iconic lifter from this time period who could be considered, definitely not the same caliber of power lifter as Reinhardt or Cole, but someone that I think a lot of people have been influenced by, a power builder, and someone that people are really interested in. So that's Don Reinhardt's going up for our old timer era. The next era of powerlifting I want to talk about, we'll call the heyday. Many people would call the golden age of powerlifting, and this would be early 80s through mid 90s, late 90s. I think this era is characterized by a great unification of powerlifting, probably the most unified time in the history of powerlifting, with seeing almost all high-level competition happening at the IPF Worlds or the USPF Nationals. So we had a true nationals, we had a true worlds competition with, if you did powerlifting, that's where you were trying to go. There wasn't multiple federations, maybe the AAU and the USPF/IPF, and there certainly wasn't, the dozens of federations that you deal with today, and times where there's maybe 3 or 4 nationals meets going on the same weekend, or 3 or 4 worlds meets going on the same weekend. Now I definitely feel that IPF is the pinnacle of lifting and the most legitimate federation in a lot of ways, but it would be a ridiculous argument to say that all the best lifters are lifting there, because now all the best lifters are very spread out. But in this heyday of powerlifting through the 80s and much of the 90s, there was a great unification in that, and IPF worlds were real worlds where if you went there and you won, you were the best powerlifter in the world. And I think it's no surprise who represents this era. It is the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Eddie Cohen. And Ed dominated for a long time, multiple weight classes. The numbers. He had the highest total in the world, lifting as a 220, as a 242, out-totaling supers, winning IPF world championships. And he's far and away, he's the guy. Mike Bridges would be a guy who could be considered here. Hideki Inaba, a lifter with 17 IPF World Championships, who has to have some level of consideration. But Lamar Gant breaking so many barriers in the deadlift particularly, but people discount Lamar Gant as an overall powerlifter because his deadlift was so great. I think he was overall a great lifter, not just a great deadlifter. But yeah, it's Ed Cohen, 901 at 220, 2403 at 220. If you look at what Ed did in that 2403 at 220 total on a 2-hour weigh-in, without specialty bars, he benched and deadlifted raw in that meet. Was Ed Cohen on drugs? Yes, of course. He failed drug tests. Ed Cohen was on drugs. But there was some level of drug testing at that meet. It was not a free-for-all, which untested powerlifting is now. If you were to transport that Ed Cohen, and keep in mind that 901 was his second deadlift attempt. He had a very close miss at 930 on his third. He had pulled 900 for a double in training, so 930 I don't think is out of the question by any means. But if you were to transport that Ed Cohen into modern powerlifting, let me take a sip here. If you were to transport that Ed Cohen into modern powerlifting, give him a 24-hour weigh-in. Take away his old squat suit, but give him new knee wraps. Give him a deadlift bar. Knowing Ed, and I've got to spend a lot of time with him over the last few years, he wouldn't, I don't think he would have been necessarily a guy to walk around at 245 and cut to 220. But let's say he walked around at 230 and cut to 220. Give him new knee wraps. Give him a deadlift bar. And I don't think it's out of the question that because he benched and deadlifted raw in that he could have put up at least the same total, 2403 at 220, maybe even a little bit more than that. The new knee wraps, maybe that's 20 or 30 pounds less than an old squat suit with old knee wraps, but he's right there. He's the greatest. He's such a humble dude to talk to him, and just a great ambassador of the sport. If you ever get the chance to meet him at the Arnold or anything like that, take that opportunity, because far beyond being a great powerlifter, Ed's just a great guy. That moves on to the next era of powerlifting, and this is the multiply era of powerlifting, from the late 90s to the late 2000s, maybe let's call it about 2009, 2010, maybe even 2011. Multiply was the dominant form of powerlifting. That is when I became interested in powerlifting. I graduated high school in 2004. I threw the shot put in college 2005, 2006, and it was in that late 2005 into 2006 where I began to discover, West Side, Elite FTS, reading all of those articles. I mean, I remember when Elite used to only put articles out on Fridays, 4 or 5 new articles a week. Every week it was by Dave Tate and Jim Wendler, Coach X or Coach H, guys like Buddy Morris and Joe Ken. And I waited all week for those as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old athlete, and then as a 19, 20-year-old high school football coach, and running the off-season program. Like, that stuff was so important to me. And I remember seeing these lifters, and I didn't know a lot about powerlifting. I was a shot putter. I was still a shot putter up until 2010, and for the large majority of that time, I didn't understand or know what multiply powerlifting was. And I think a big part of that was multiply powerlifting was the only kind of powerlifting for that time period. So everyone was doing that. So I didn't look at it and think like, well, this guy looks like he's doing something different than the next guy. Everyone was squatting, pretty wide out of a monolift, and all the top lifters were squatting 1,000 into the 1100s, maybe a couple 1200s. And I would read these articles from Elite and Westside and see the numbers. And it's, we've had this many people squat over 1100, this many people squat over 1,000, this many people bench over 700 and 800. And to be honest, as a 19, 20 year, I think when I was 19 years old, my freshman year or beginning of my sophomore year in college, I squatted like 630, squatted about 630, bench like 440. I didn't really train the deadlift at all then, but it wasn't out of comprehension to me that someone was squatting 1100 if I was doing 630, 650 around that time. I figured, well, that's all they do. So the idea of an assistive gear didn't really cross my mind. But it was those people, those Westside lifters from that era, and guys like Gary Frank and stuff, who I was reading articles about and being like, wow, what these guys are doing is awesome. I would like to do that as well. And I think the person who stands above all else, above all others from that era of multiply powerlifting, and our representative here on the Mount Rushmore of powerlifting, Mount Liftmore, is Chuck Vogelpohl. And if you talk to so many lifters, of my age, I'm 31 and a little bit older, I think, Chuck Vogelpohl is going to be the name that comes up the most often as their greatest influence, as their greatest inspiration in powerlifting. And there's probably people watching this, listening to this, who don't know who Chuck Vogelpohl is, but may have seen a picture of a wild-eyed man squatting or deadlifting with a flame beanie on. This is not a Mount Rushmore of fashion sense. It is a Mount Rushmore of powerlifting, and Chuck Vogelpohl and his flame beanie definitely belong on there. I'm going to tell the sculptor, include the flame beanie on the mountain sculpture, because it's got to be there, because it's quintessentially Chuck Vogelpohl. It's quintessentially 2000s multiply powerlifting and this era of powerlifting, that he was the most hardcore, the most intense, most epitomized that time. I think he was the epitome, the pinnacle of Westside in a lot of ways, and not even that he was necessarily the best lifter, because he had some injuries that really limited his bench press. He was this phenomenal squatter, but he embodied so much of what that time was about. It was about excess and extreme in a lot of ways, and he was certainly that. I think other people who deserve kind of an honorable mention in this category would be Gary Frank, who I mentioned. He set so many new levels of excellence in the total, and he's just a freak phenom athlete. I think he was the first to go 24, 25, 26, and 2700 in the total. Maybe the first to 2800 as well. Look up Gary Frank NFL Combine, and you'll see some numbers of a truly phenomenally powerful athlete. Matt Krosielewski, I think, was someone who was highly influential in this time, with the physique, with the intensity to his training, with the great results. Certainly there was a time where the transition comes to our next phase, where there was a time in multiply powerlifting decadence, where there was too much of there was too much extremism in it, where the weight became the higher priority over the execution of the lifts, I think, and sort of in a lot of ways brought an end to that style of lifting's dominance, but highly influential to a lot of powerlifters, even like myself, even as someone, as a known Westside hater, multiply basher. That's what I first knew when I went to do my first powerlifting meet. I remember being on Elite FTS website, and I was sponsored at the time by them, but as a shot putter in 2000, from late 2009 to mid 2010, I was still throwing the shot put. And as I got ready to do my first meet, I was on the phone or corresponding emails with their customer service rep at the time, Rhonda. I don't know if Rhonda still works there, but she was very helpful. And I remember, being on the page on their store, looking at looking to get a singlet to do my first meet that I did in October 2010, and being very confused as I looked at these things, being like, well, why is this one, asking Rhonda, why is this one $50? I was like, can you guys send me this one, the Metal Pro Ace squatter? Like, is that a better singlet than this $50 one? It's $200. It must be better than the $50 one. And she informed me at that point that she's like, well, that's a squat suit. I thought you need a singlet. And I was like, well, what's the difference? Isn't this is the suit that you do squats in? And she's like, well, it helps. And I didn't understand, even as I prepared to do my first powerlifting meet. So while this time was highly influential to me, it maybe was misleading in some ways as well, but still an important part of powerlifting history, and Chuck Vogelpohl is our representative there. Before I get into what I will call the modern era of powerlifting, I'll say that women's powerlifting, not been around quite as long as men's powerlifting, and I'm not as familiar with the longer history of women's powerlifting. I know that there's definitely some long-term, some older time and golden age lifters. Jan Todd being a great lifter, Bev Francis, as potential candidates on here. But I think women's powerlifting, which is such an impactful part of the sport and an incredibly fast growing and awesome to see. There's so many great women's lifters on there. There was two women that really, to me, stand above the rest in women's powerlifting and influencing it to be what it is today. And those two athletes are Kim Walford and Jen Thompson. We're going to put Jen Thompson on to my Mount Rushmore of powerlifting, because even though I think that Kim is a better lifter than Jen, I think that Jen has been maybe a bit more influential in the growth of women's powerlifting, because so many people, the bench press is so universally known, and she is so exceptional at that lift, and being able to have videos go viral with millions and millions of views. And she was the first to Wilks 500, which at the time was this sort of unheard of level, and now you've got women Wilksing over 600 and in the IPF over 550, and dozens of athletes, female athletes worldwide, making Wilks over 500. Jen was the first to do that. Both her and Kim have won every IPF title there was to win. So Jen Thompson is my representative up there as the women's, for the representative of women's powerlifting. And then finally that brings me to my modern era of powerlifting. So we had the old timer era from the start of the sport into the late 70s, then from the late 70s through the mid to late 90s, maybe 1997, 1998, the heyday, the golden era of powerlifting, with a great unification, and IPF worlds really being a true worlds that all powerlifters were striving towards. So we had Don Reinhout, our old timer representative, Ed Cohen in the heyday, the golden era, the multiply era, a huge part of things from the late 90s to the late 2000s, early 2010, 2011 maybe. Chuck Vogelpohl there. Jennifer Thompson being our representative of women's powerlifting, finally bringing us to the modern era of powerlifting from about 2010 up until the present. And my choice for Mount to lift more, the Mount Rushmore of powerlifting there, is Dan Green. I think Dan Green is probably the most influential person through his lifting performances to bring people to the sport of powerlifting, to popularize raw powerlifting. For for people to look at, if you were to go to a meet and ask who the first person people saw do powerlifting that made them want to do it, I think Dan Green is going to be the name that comes up the most often. The physique, phenomenal. The lifting performances, incredible. Not only did Dan bring this power building, bodybuilder physique to powerlifting, he did it with incredible numbers. He was breaking records from the 70s and the 80s, breaking records from people like Larry Pacifico and John Cole and John Cuck, totaling 1,000 kilos in the 110s at 242, 2210 at 242 back in 2014. I believe that there was a time where Dan held the sleeved and wrapped total records for the 220s, sleeves and wraps, and 242s. 4 total world records at the same time. Just an incredible athlete and lifts to a very high standard. My runner-up for that position, Dan, would be Stan Efferding. Stan brought a lot of the same qualities with the bodybuilding crossover. Very, very well-known lifter, and I'm sure influenced a lot of people to want to join the sport, as well as some incredible lifts and total records. I'd give the nod to Dan here, one, because Dan did a lot more powerlifting meets, has done a lot more powerlifting meets than Stan. And really the Stan Efferding heyday, Stan probably did like 5 meets with really significant totals at them, his most significant being 2303 at 275, a meet that I also competed at, and it was great to see him do that. So as he pushed numbers up in the 275 class, very, very impressive, very, very influential lifter. He just doesn't have nearly the volume of meets that Dan does. I also think that more of Dan's meets and his most successful meets were done with walkouts, with a bit stricter judging. So I'd give the nod to him there. There's so many phenomenal lifters out there. There's people who are going to set these numbers so much higher, and if I did this podcast 3 years from now or 5 years from now and 10 years from now, the modern era of powerlifting, it's going to be so much harder to choose someone there. But Dan was someone who really came on the scene early in this time of modern powerlifting. 2010, 2011, the first time that I really came to know of Dan was, I believe, late 2012, and the first time he broke the 220 sleeves record. And the records are just unbelievable now, but so many of those people who are setting those unbelievable records, I don't know that they would have even known that powerlifting existed if it wasn't for Dan Green. So that is my Mount Rushmore of powerlifting, Mount Liftmore. This is a combination not only of their lifting success, but also their influence on the sport and the culture of the sport. So we have Don Reinhout, Ed Cohen, Chuck Vogelpole, Jennifer Thompson, and Dan Green. 5 faces up on the mountain there. This was Beers with Chad, a special bonus episode to the Jug Life. Again, I'm drinking, though I know I don't get to really drink too much of it because I'm talking the whole time. Knee Deep Brewing Company's Lupilin River Imperial IPA. Make sure you subscribe to the Jug Life. If you enjoy it on iTunes, give us a 5-star review, write us something funny or nice. I always appreciate that. Upcoming events, Friday the 13th, April 13th, we will be at Max's Gym / CrossFit Oakland in Oakland, California for Jug Life Live. There's going to be a little free snatch clinic with Max and some of the Team Juggernaut lifters. And then we'll record an episode there talking a bit more about snatch technique and all that good stuff, as well as answering your questions. There'll also be some kegs, and we can kind of just hang out and have a good time. Sign up for that. It's free, but register for it at under the events section at store.jtsstrength.com. Beyond that, not too many. The only other seminar in the works right now is the Juggernaut Performance Summit. That's myself, Max Ada, Dr. Mike Israetel, Dr. James Hoffman, and Dr. Quinn Hennock. this August 19th in New York. And make sure you sign up for that. It's all 5 parts of important aspects of training, all kind of in one stop. It's me talking about programming, Max talking about technical development, Mike on nutrition, Quinn on movement, and James on recovery. So one very information-packed day. You can also get CEUs for the NSCA from that event. If you're interested in online coaching, juggernautcoaching.com. We offer powerlifting, weightlifting, strongman, super total, and power building programs of multiple different levels, prices, and engagement with the coaches. So go ahead and check that out. Subscribe to our YouTube. Thanks for watching. Thanks for following. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.